Hi. Okay, so we are going to start on chapter 7. This is page 73. Take a little sniff ski over there if you need a book. Go check the back table. All right, let's do a quick recap of chapter 6. What was the big to-do that happened on Animal Farm in chapter 6? Anybody remember from yesterday? What was the big to-do? Yeah, the windmill blew up. And who did they blame? Snowball. All right. What else did they find out? What did they find out about the pigs? What had the pigs done that they said that they were not going to do? Yep. Yep, they moved into the farmhouse, didn't they? And they were sleeping on beds. And then they were like, hey, wait a minute. I'm pretty sure that it says in the Seven Commandments that we're not supposed to do that. But then they switched it, right? They switched it right on the barn to what? Yep. Won't sleep on a bed with sheets. See how we tweak that just a little bit? Yeah. Any predictions about what's going to happen moving forward with all this pig shenanigans? Anyone? Okay, well, I guess we'll see, won't we? All right, let's take a look here. Page 73. It was a bitter winter. The stormy weather was followed by sleet and snow, and then by a hard frost which did not break till well into February. The animals carried on the best they could with the rebuilding of the windmill, well knowing that the outside world was watching them, and that the envious human beings would rejoice and triumph if the mill were not finished on time. Out of spite, the human beings pretended not to believe that it was Snowball who had destroyed the windmill. They said it had fallen down because the walls were too thin. Now, remember, there was a loud noise. Could it have been the windmill falling? Yes. Could it have been some sort of explosion? Hard to say, I guess. The animals knew that this was not the case. Still, it had been decided to build the walls 3 feet thick this time, instead of 18 inches as before, which meant collecting much larger quantities of stone. For a long time, the quarry was full of snowdrifts, and nothing could be done. Some progress was made in the dry, frosty weather that followed, but it was cruel work, and the animals could not feel so hopeful about it as they had felt before. They were always cold and usually hungry as well. Only Boxer and Clover never lost heart. Squealer made excellent speeches on the joy of service and the dignity of labor. You feeling that, Squealer? But the other animals found more inspiration in Boxer's strength and his never failing cry of, I will work harder. In January, food fell short. The corn ration was drastically reduced, and it was announced that an extra potato ration would be issued to make up for it. Then it was discovered that the greater part of the potato crop had been frosted in the clamps, which had not been covered thickly enough. The potatoes had become soft and discolored, and only a few were edible. For days at a time, the animals had nothing to eat but chaff and mangles. Starvation seemed to stare them in the face. It was vitally necessary to conceal this fact from the outside world. Emboldened by the collapse of the windmill, the human beings were inventing fresh lies about Animal Farm. Once again, it was being put about that all the animals were dying of famine and disease, and that they were continually fighting among themselves, and had resorted to cannibalism and infanticide. All right, you know what genocide is, so what is infanticide? Yeah. Was this really happening on the farm? Cannibalism? No. No, it was not. Napoleon was well aware of the bad results that might follow if the real facts of the food situation were known, and he decided to make use of Mr. Whymper to spread a contrary impression. All right, Whymper, get out there and tell him how great it's going. Hitherto, the animals had little or no contact with Whymper on his weekly visits. However, a few selected animals, mostly sheep, right? Sheep who'll do anything, they just follow blindly, were instructed to remark casually in his hearing that rations had been increased. In addition, Napoleon ordered the almost empty bins in the store shed to be filled nearly to the brim with sand. Why sand? Which was then covered up with what remained of the grain and meal, right? So they're making it look like they got plenty. When en realidad, they did not. Okay? On some suitable pretext, Whymper was led through the store shed and allowed to catch a glimpse of the bins. He was deceived and continued to report to the outside world that there was no food shortage on Animal Farm. Lots of deception going on here. Not great. Nevertheless, towards the end of January, it became obvious that it would be necessary to procure some more grain from somewhere. In these days, Napoleon rarely appeared in public, but spent all his time in the farmhouse, which was guarded at each door by fierce-looking dogs. Of course. When he did emerge, it was in a ceremonial manner, with an escort of 6 dogs who closely surrounded him and growled if anyone came too near. Frequently, he did not even appear on Sunday mornings. Too busy for that, I guess. But issued his orders through one of the other pigs, usually Squealer. One Sunday, Squealer announced that the hens, who had just come in to lay again, must surrender their eggs. Napoleon had accepted through Whymper a contract for 400 eggs a week. Oh, how generous of him. The price of these would pay for enough grain and meal to keep the farm going until summer came on and conditions were easier. When the hens heard this, they raised a terrible outcry. They had been warned earlier that this sacrifice might be necessary, but had not believed that it would really happen. Well, guess what, chickadees? Here we go. They were just getting their clutches ready for the spring sitting, and they protested that to take eggs away now would be murder. For the first time since the expulsion of Jones, there was something resembling a rebellion, led by 3 young black Minorca pullets. The hens made a determined effort to thwart Napoleon's wishes. They're like, I ain't doing that. Forget it. Their method was to fly up to the rafters and there lay their eggs, which smashed to pieces on the floor. Napoleon acted swiftly and ruthlessly. He ordered the hens' rations to be stopped and decreed that any animal giving so much as a grain of corn to a hen should be punished by death. It's getting real in here. The dogs saw to it that these orders were carried out. For 5 days, the hens held out. Then they capitulated and went back to their nesting boxes. 9 hens had died in the meantime. Their bodies were buried in the orchard, and it was given out that they had died of coccidiosis. Whymper heard nothing of the affair, and the eggs were duly delivered, a grocer's van driving up to the farm once a week to take them away. Shahudi. Not good. Okay. All right, let's keep going. All of this while no more had been seen of Snowball. He was rumored to be hiding out on one of the neighboring farms, either Foxwood or Pinchfield. Napoleon was by this time on slightly better terms with the other farmers than before. It happened that there was in the yard a pile of timber which had been stacked there 10 years earlier, when a beach spinney was cleared, it was well seasoned, and Whymper had advised Napoleon to sell it. Both Mr. Pilkington and Mr. Frederick were anxious to buy it. Napoleon was hesitating between the two, unable to make up his mind. It was noticed that whenever he seemed on the point of coming to an agreement with Frederick, Snowball was declared to be in hiding at Foxwood, while when he inclined towards Pilkington, Snowball was said to be at Pinchfield. Isn't that convenient? All right. Suddenly, earlier in the spring, an alarming thing was discovered. Snowball was secretly frequenting the farm at night. Do you suppose this is true? Do you think Snowball is really going to return after all this? Why would he? Why would he? Okay, well, that's the rumors going around. The animals were so distraught that they could hardly sleep in their stalls. Every night, it was said, he came creeping in under cover of darkness and performed all kinds of mischief. He stole the corn, he upset the milk pails, he broke the eggs, he trampled the seed beds, he gnawed the bark of the fruit trees. Now, why would they be saying that this was happening? Why would Napoleon and the other pigs be saying that Snowball was coming in and upsetting the milk pails, breaking the eggs? Where do you think this stuff's going that Snowball is destroying? Yeah, the pigs are consuming them. So we gotta place blame on where is this stuff going, right? Because now the animals are starting to starve, right? Do you remember when this was the case, when Jones was there? Okay, in the Russian Revolution, when they decided we are going to fight against this because what do we have to lose? And now here they are again after they've overthrown the government, and the new government that has risen up saying that it was going to be all about everybody is now doing the same thing that was happening in Russia before the revolution. Insanity. All right. Whenever anything went wrong, it became usual to attribute it to Snowball. If a window was broken or a drain was backed up, someone was certain to say that Snowball had come in the night and done it. And when the key to the storage shed was lost, the whole farm was convinced that Snowball had thrown it down the well. Curiously enough, they went on believing this even after the misladen key was found under a sack of meal. The cows declared unanimously that Snowball crept into their stalls and milked them in their sleep. The rats, which had been troublesome that winter, were also said to be in league with Snowball. Napoleon decreed that there should be a full investigation into Snowball's activities. With his dogs in attendance, he set out and made a careful tour of inspection of the farm buildings, the other animals following at a respectful distance. At every few steps, Napoleon stopped and sniffed the ground for traces of Snowball's footsteps, which, he said, he could detect by the smell. Yeah, okay. He snuffed in every corner, in the barn, in the cowshed, in the hen houses, in the vegetable garden, and found traces of Snowball almost everywhere. He would put his snout to the ground, give several deep sniffs, and exclaim in a terrible voice, "Snowball! He has been here! I can smell him distinctly!" And at the word Snowball, all the dogs let out a blood-curdling growl and showed their side teeth. The animals were thoroughly frightened. It seemed to them as though Snowball was some kind of invisible influence pervading the air about them and menacing them with all kinds of dangers. In the evening, Squealer called them together, and with an alarmed expression on his face, told them that he had some serious news to report. What do you think it's going to be? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And not those of you who are reading ahead. What do you think? Okay, let's see. Comrades, cried Squealer, making little nervous skips. A most terrible thing has been discovered. Snowball has sold himself to Frederick of Pinchfield Farm, who is even now plotting to attack us and take our farm away from us. Snowball is to act as his guide when the attack begins. But there is worse than that. We have thought that Snowball's rebellion was caused simply by his vanity and ambition, but we were wrong, comrades. Do you know what the real reason was? Snowball was in league with Jones from the very start. Okay. He was Jones' secret agent all the time. It has been all proven by documents which he left behind him, and which we have only just discovered. To my mind, this explains a great deal, comrades. Did we not see for ourselves how he attempted, fortunately without success, to get us defeated and destroyed at the Battle of Cowshed? The animals were stupefied. What? What? This was wickedness, far outdoing Snowball's destruction of the windmill. But it was some minutes before they could fully take it in. They all remembered, or thought they remembered, how they had seen Snowball charging ahead of them at the Battle of Cowshed, how he had rallied and encouraged them at every turn, and how he had not paused for an instant, even when the pellets from Jones's gun had wounded his back. At first, it was a little difficult to see how this fitted in with his being on Jones's side. Even Boxer, who seldom asked questions, was puzzled. He lay down, tucked his forehoofs beneath him, shut his eyes, and with a hard effort managed to formulate his thoughts. I do not believe that, he said. Snowball fought bravely at the Battle of Cowshed. I saw him myself. Did we not give him Animal Hero First Class immediately afterwards? That was our mistake, comrade, for we know now, it is all written down in the secret documentation that we have found, that in reality he was trying to lure us to our doom. Da-na-na. But he was wounded, said Boxer. We all saw him running with blood. That was part of the arrangement, cried Squealer. Jones's shot only grazed him. I could show you this in his own writing, if you were able to read it. The plot was for Snowball at the critical moment to give the signal for flight and leave the field to the enemy, and he very nearly succeeded. I will even say, comrades, he would have succeeded if it had not been for our heroic leader, Comrade Napoleon. Do you not remember how, just at the moment when Jones and his men had got inside the yard, Snowball suddenly turned and fled, and many animals followed him? And do you not remember, too, that it was just at that moment when panic was spreading and all seemed lost, that Comrade Napoleon sprang forward with a cry of death to humanity? He sank his teeth in Jones's leg. Surely you remember that, comrades, exclaimed Squealer, frisking from side to side. Is that true? Is that what happened, ladies and gentlemen? No, that is a load of hooky. Now, when Squealer described the scene so graphically, it seemed to the animals that they did remember it. At any rate, they remembered that at the critical moment of the battle, Snowfield had turned to flee. But Boxer was still a little uneasy. I do not believe that Snowball was a traitor at the beginning, he said finally. What he has done since is different, but I believe at the Battle of Cowshed, he was a good comrade. Our leader, Comrade Napoleon, announced Squealer, speaking very slowly and firmly, has stated categorically categorically, comrade, that Snowball was Jones's agent from the beginning. Yes, and from long before the rebellion was ever thought of. That is different, said Boxer. If Comrade Napoleon says it, it must be right. That is the true spirit, comrade, cried Squealer. But it was noticed he cast a very ugly look at Boxer with his little twinkling eyes. He turned to go, then passed and added impressively, I warn every animal on this farm to keep his eyes very wide open, for we have reason to think that some of Snowball's secret agents are lurking among us at this very moment. Okay, so who do you think he's referencing there? When he says some of Snowball's secret buddies are here spying. Who do you think he's referencing? Yeah, Boxer. He's ticked at Boxer because Boxer didn't believe him, because Boxer cast a doubt on whether or not Snowball was a bad guy from the beginning. Even though he agreed with him in the end, he stirred up some trouble. So now Squealer is gonna take care of business, right? 4 days later in the afternoon, Napoleon ordered all the animals to assemble in the yard. When they were all gathered there, Napoleon emerged from the farmhouse wearing both his medals, for he had recently awarded himself Animal Hero First Class and Animal Hero Second Class, with his 9 huge dogs frisking round him and uttering growls that sent shivers down all the animals' spines. They all cowered silently in their places, seeming to know in advance that some terrible thing was about to happen. All right. We're getting close there, friends. Hang in there, all right? Okay. Napoleon stood sternly surveying his audience. Then he uttered a high-pitched whimper. Immediately, the dogs bounded forward, seized 4 of the pigs by the ear, and dragged them, squealing with pain and terror, to Napoleon's feet. The pigs' ears were bleeding. The dogs had tasted blood, and for a few moments they appeared to go quite mad. To the amazement of everybody, 3 of them flung themselves upon Boxer. Boxer saw them coming and put out his great hoof, caught a dog in midair, and pinned him to the ground. All right, so do you think it was an accident that the dogs went after Boxer after this little... Yeah, it was not an accident. It was all set up, right? Because Squealer couldn't convince Boxer quickly enough that his lies were true. The dog shrieked for mercy, and the other 2 fled with their tails between their legs. Boxer looked at Napoleon to know whether he should crush the dog to death or let it go. Napoleon appeared to change countenance and sharply ordered Boxer to let the dogs go, whereat Boxer lifted his hoof, and the dog slunk away, bruised and howling. Do you think that's going to go well for Boxer, even though he's just protecting himself? Of course not. Okay. Presently, the tumult died down. What do you think tumult means? The 4 pigs waited trembling with guilt written on every line of their countenance. Napoleon now called upon them to confess their crimes. They were the same 4 pigs as had protested when Napoleon abolished the Sunday meetings. Without any further prompting, they confessed that they had been secretly in touch with Snowball ever since the expulsion, that they had collaborated with him in destroying the windmill, and that they had centered in agreement with him to hand over Animal Farm to Mr. Frederick. All right, now, what are some possible reasons that these pigs would confess to this? Have you ever heard of a person confessing to something when they had not done it? Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it happens all the time in our justice system, right? They're like, well, if you plead guilty to something lesser, then we won't kill you. Is it possible something like that is going on? Is it likely that the pigs are in cahoots with Snowball? Is it likely that Snowball is even behind all of the shenanigans that are going on Animal Farm that they're saying that they're accusing him of being? Okay. Well, anyway, they confess. They added that Snowball had privately admitted to them that he had been Jones's secret agent for the past years. When they had finished their confession, the dogs promptly tore their throats out. And in a terrible voice, Napoleon demanded whether any other animals had anything to confess. The three hens who had been the ringleaders in the attempted rebellion over the eggs now came forward and stated that Snowball had appeared to them in a dream and incited them to disobey Napoleon's orders. They too were slaughtered. Then a goose came forward and confessed to having secreted 6 ears of corn during the last year's harvest and eaten them in the night. Then a sheep confessed to having urinated in the drinking pool, urged to do this, so she said, by Snowball, and 2 other sheep confessed to having murdered an old ram, an especially devoted follower of Napoleon, by chasing him round and round a bonfire when he was suffering from a cough. That's kind of confusing. We should look into this. And we will. They were all slain on the spot. And so the tale of confessions and executions went on until there was a pile of corpses lying before Napoleon's feet, and the air was heavy with the smell of blood, which had been unknown there since the expulsion of Jones. All right. So we are going to talk about this because it's kind of icky. And what's the point? What does it have to do with the Russian Revolution? Oh, you will find out. When it was all over, the remaining animals, except for the pigs and dogs, crept away in a body. They were shaken and miserable. They did not know which was more shocking: the treachery of the animals who had leagued themselves with Snowball, or the cruel retribution they had just witnessed. In the old days, there had often been scenes of bloodshed, equally terrible, but it seemed to all of them that it was far worse now that it was happening among themselves. Since Jones had left the farm until today, no animal had killed another animal. Not even a rat had been killed. They had made their way on to the little knoll where the half-finished windmill stood, and with one accord they all lay down, as though huddling together for warmth. Clover, Muriel, Benjamin, the cows, the sheep, and a whole flock of geese and hens, everyone indeed except the cat, who had suddenly disappeared just before Napoleon ordered the animals to assemble. For some time nobody spoke. Only Boxer remained on his feet. He fidgeted to and fro, swishing his long black tail against the sides and occasionally uttering a little whinny of surprise. Finally he said, "I do not understand it. I would not have believed that such things could happen on our farm. It must be due to some fault in ourselves. The solution, as I see it, is to work harder. From now onwards, I shall get up a full hour earlier in the mornings." And he moved off as his lumbering trot and made for the quarry. Having got there, he collected 2 successive loads of stone and dragged them down to the windmill before returning for the night. The animals huddled. That takes us to the top of 86, and we will continue